Okay. Yeah, I think all of us are kind of processing all the information that we took in for the day. But now we want to talk about creating a reopening plan. So I'm going to turn my video on. So here's the plan. Each campus should work to create a reopening plan. Whether you do it today or tomorrow, at some point, minors will return to campus. What we're encouraging you all to do is to work with the work groups that your pre-college liaisons have created and maybe make recommendations to them based on how your program looks. But I'm hoping that everyone in this group will take the time out to read the guide put out by the ACA, as well as the CDC's checklist. Because I will say that this work will be overwhelming if you don't do the research first. And so I wanted to remind you all of the website that will have all these resources there, from the field guide to the CDC's checklist to guidance for virtual spaces. Now is the time to actually do the research. And then how we plan to continue to support you is we plan on continuing these workshops, but they'll be 2-hour workshops. So next month's focus will simply be on developing your communicable disease protocol plan. And so Michael Ambrose will come back, but you will all need to look at templates for communicable disease protocols as you start designing them for your camps. And so then you can ask Michael questions when you come back with that project. So I can put on the website what the plan is, but February will be communicable disease protocols. And then March, we will hop into social emotional programming, and we will bring the doctors back as well as a mental health first aid specialist to talk about what those protective factors are and how you develop them. And then we'll continue to do the professional development series. So today was really just an introduction, kind of like dip your toes in it so you can start thinking about planning. For those of you who are planning on staying in a virtual space, what I will say is that it's going to give you more time to prepare to go into a physical space. So don't say, well, I'm not doing anything in person this year, so I don't need to work on this plan right now. This plan will take time. This plan will take resources, and this plan will take communication with your campus leadership. So the reopening plan, I don't know, let me share my screen so I can show you what I'm talking about with the field guide. So we've created a survey based on all the recommendations in the field guide. And so you all won't have to go through and kind of create a checklist on your own. So let's see if it will let me share. And you all can see my, okay, great. So what we did was we took each section of the field guide and created a questionnaire about those particular things. Let me scroll up. So the first one that came up, of course, was a communication plan, right? What is your return policy? What is your pickup policy? What is your policy about testing and oversight, and how, you know, like if you're doing a one-day event, what is the requirement that you're asking of these programs? Participants to let you know that, like, hey, I came in for a tour and 72 hours later, I tested positive for COVID, right? Because that goes back to contact tracing and exponential exposure. So just working with folks so they can let you know that if something has happened after they left your event. So that gets into screening and preventing the spread. That all goes into communication, having a testing plan. So you'll get a questionnaire that will ask you these particular questions. And then you can take the answers or your grade and give them to your campus leadership and say, hey, you know, I think I'm ready, or no, I don't think that I'm ready. Facilities management, most of these areas are managed by the campuses themselves. What you want to do is look at like what your obligation will be as a program. Say if you use a classroom, are you all required to wipe down the tables when you leave and come back, or are they going to use custodial staff to do so? So when you're thinking about, oh, well, custodial staff do most of our cleaning, they won't be coming through and cleaning your rooms every 40 minutes or in between each class. And the protocol is you leave the classroom, you clean before you leave, and then you come back and you wipe down again. And so some of this might be you're training your students to do and your staff to do so that they're in a good hygiene habit. So what is your plan for that? Will you allow swimming? Will campuses allow swimming? To bring that up, if that was a recreational activity you did back when we were physically open, right? And then talking about food service, you know, do you have a plan so that you can stay within your cohorts? and that you're not blending with other folks. I know that for Penn State, what they did was a cohort model, and most of the time, the participants ate outside during this year. Now, they had considerably smaller programs, but they couldn't oversee the constant cleaning of the tables, and they couldn't oversee the not commingling, and so they did an outside dining plan, a sack lunch plan, and if it was raining outside or inclement weather, then they would take their sack lunches back to their classrooms, but they didn't necessarily use cafeterias, so that's something to consider. And then once again, cleaning and disinfection comes down to, do you have the supplies that you need and who's obligated to do what? So we do have kind of like, we want to give autonomy to the campuses to be able to say when they're ready or not to open, but we want to make sure that you have the tools. And I believe that the checklist, the field guide, and the CDC's checklist will help you to inform your campuses if you're ready. And so the field guide itself is the reopening guidance, and you just have to show that you're able to do it. I will admit it's 125 pages, and it's not a hard read at all, because a lot of the stuff you will already be doing. You'll just have to modify it because it's COVID. And if you're a residential program, you were probably already doing a lot of these things, especially if you were licensed by the state. So communicating with your campers and your staff about the expectations of interactions, letting your students know that it's going to look different when they come back and what those differences will be. If you're charging the same amount of money for the programs and yet they're doing things differently, be clear and transparent about the justification of cost. I mean, there's cost involved with cleaning. There's cost involved in software to safely track all the issues that might come out with COVID. So being transparent. And then also deciding what kind of camp are you going to have? Are you going to have a commuter? Are you going to have a residential? Because you might be able to bring residential programs back because it's easier to keep them contained once you get them quarantined, pre-tested, and then tested once they're there. It's easier to control who they're interacting with. Commuter programs will have a different experience in that when they go home, you don't know what happens. And so thinking about on your campus, which ones will you lean towards bringing back first? And I know that a lot of people have said, well, schools aren't back, so we may not get back. And I've sat in a lot of meetings with the schools who have allowed programs to open, but not the actual school. And the justification was that in a program, you can limit the number of participants and the spaces that they're in. So if you have a school open, all 2,000 kids are in the school and that's kind of it. Versus if you have a program on campus, you can say, I'm only going to do 18 kids and I'm going to have them in this classroom that usually houses 60 kids, right? And so you have a little bit more flexibility in using preventative measures. So, I support campuses and whatever their decision is, as long as we're working through the guides and the recommendations and going through a checklist. Yeah, there's some things in there about PPE, what amount of PPE do you need? And then sample letters to parents, cleaning, disinfecting checklist, and then restroom kind of locker room protocol. So those are all great references for you all to use as you're thinking about returning. If you are staying in virtual settings, I would strongly encourage folks to think about increasing social emotional as a priority, because the longer we stay isolated, the more youth may continue to disengage and the more the trauma of COVID will continue to exacerbate. So I would encourage you all to think about that too in some of the decisions to stay or not stay or hybrids or things like that. So now it's kind of the opening for questions for folks to kind of talk about their reopening or non-reopening plans. So what I would say is, what is one thing that you will do when you leave here today in anticipation of returning minors to your campus? Because we're going to send you out into your breakout rooms. So in your breakout, what is one thing you will do this week or today? What is the first thing you will do to help prepare your campus for minors returning to campus? Question number 2, what is your greatest concern about returning minors to campus? Or what do you think will be most challenging? And then question number 3, what kind of supports will you ask for from your campus leadership to do this work well? So we're actually going to give you a little bit more time for this one because it's 3 questions. So we're going to give you about 25 minutes to go over those questions. What is one thing that you will do to prepare your program or yourself for reopening? what is something that really concerns you about reopening, and what is something that you will ask your campuses for in supporting you and getting ready for minors coming back to campus. So Tom, if you will break everybody out, we will take 25 minutes, or we'll say 33. We'll give you right till 4 o'clock. Please take notes because we want to definitely hear you share out. So we are at the last kind of part of our day today. So thank you all for sticking it out with us all day and sharing in this experience. And what we want to know now is basically your takeouts from the event, some things that you'll take away and what you'll do instead, what you need from us to continue to do this work well. So this is really kind of informal. We'd love to hear what you talked about in your groups, and we'll kind of take notes here on the back end. And basically, like, what more can we do for you all as you continue to do this work? So feel free to unmute and share about what happened in your group, as well as any other thoughts you may have.
Hi, I can go first. Thank you, Pranisha. So in our group, we talked about how a lot of us would start with assessing our students, our staff, on whether they are prepared to return to campus this summer, because a lot of us don't want to plan an in-person program if families are not ready to allow their children to go back to our campuses. And so, and then again, if our staff, if our teachers don't want to return to campus, to teach for us, then that's something we also have to think about. So we talked about the, assessing our needs to make sure we're all on the same page before we make those kind of decisions. And then we also talked about whether, if we are prepared to come on campus, what will that space look like on campus? Because we're assuming that, on these UW campuses, that summer courses will be back in action. And so will we be competing for space again? When some of our programs, at least at UWM, I always feel like pre-college programs are always competing with each other for space on campus. Well, with these safety guidelines, if we're going to have to be spread out, we're going to need more space. So are we even going to be allowed all that space to be safe? That was a concern of ours.
Thank you for sharing out. And that's 100% true. Is what space will you have to be able to do this work? And do we need to look at schedules in that maybe multiple programs aren't running at the same time? Do we need to spread them out, of course, across the entire summer? And then working with your pre-college liaison so you get a better understanding of what programs plan to be there at what times, so you all can negotiate internally to be like, okay, I'm the first week in June, you're the second week of June. Because I think the programs will have to be shorter and you don't want overlap if at all possible. So I agree 100% that that is a good conversation. That was a good place to start. Thank you for sharing. Next, this is kind of your social mixer too. So say who you are, where you're from, and any thoughts or observations. Safe space, safe space.
This is Jennifer Mitchell. I can speak up for some years. And, whether, because the need for volunteers to be equally trained to the rest of staff, and is it even beneficial to have volunteers, or is it better to have all your staff, have more staff, so that there's everyone's ready and prepared. In my program, we have volunteers that come and go a lot. And if we want to keep pods and keep people from coming and going too much, it's a problem with the volunteers, because you want them there longer, for long rather than just hours here, which is how sometimes we've used volunteers in the past. So if I were to run my program, I have to rethink the whole volunteer part of it. And do I not have volunteers, and do I have more paid staff that would assume that same volunteer role? So it's something to think about when we have those types of staffing there.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jennifer, and good to see you again. And those are all really good questions to be having. And like I said, the whole point of this presentation, the whole series today, was to get you all thinking and to ask questions so you can plan. So thank you very much. Anyone else? I'd love to hear from all of you if possible.
Yes, my name is Brandy Williams. I'm from UW Milwaukee. And one of the things that we talked about is some of these decisions require other stakeholders. and what type of timeline would we have and when we would be notified to execute some of these plans in an efficient and timely manner?
I will say that we've been having communications with campus leadership and also working with your pre-college liaisons. We're relying on your pre-college liaisons to kind of let your campus leadership know when you think that you're ready, and then also to be able to provide documentation. And then I believe that based on the recommendation from your liaisons, that your campus will say yay or nay. What I will say is that there's no rush that you have to open for spring or that you have to open for summer. So it's in the timeline that you're actually able to get it done safely. The other stakeholders, I would say start engaging with them now, whether you decide to start in spring, summer, or next year. Engage with them now. So your risk management folks, your legal, your HR, there was a question that came in the chat, like, what is our liability if people think that we're negligent and somehow folks were exposed? And, that goes into, working with your legal team, but also knowing that, the Supreme Court hasn't ruled on liability for employers for COVID, because it's hard to prove that you got it at your workplace, or it's hard to prove that you got it in a program. So there's not a lot of movement to put accountability for COVID because it's just here, right? Does everyone know who their pre-college liaison is on their campus? Because we could also have them unmute and unmask themselves and introduce themselves if they would.
I will also put the list in the chat because I know that not all the liaisons are present.
Okay, great.
I'll put myself out there. I'm the liaison for UW Green Bay. I'm Michael Casborn, director of TRIO and pre-college.
And I know there's a couple.
I'm Mackey. I'm the liaison for UW Platteville.
Thank you. Okay, well, we'll put the rest of the liaisons in the list. So what you all will receive, if you don't have any more questions for today or comments, which, like I said, this is what you'll feel like as teachers or program directors putting on virtual programs. You'll be like, I can't see anybody on the screen. I'm not hearing any answers. Are they engaged? And what I will say is that I consider you all to be very engaged because, there's over 100 of you that have stayed on the entire day. So clearly you find value in the information. And we also just recognize it's the time we're in. We're tired. We've been at this all day. So I understand the participants, not specifically answering questions. But if you have questions you want to put in the chat, you can do that now. And if not, I definitely won't keep you all. I'll give you some time back. What does a liaison do? So your pre-college liaison is basically supposed to be kind of the eyes and ears on campus to get compliance information to youth activities and program coordinators. So whether you're a commuter, residential, a conference, a field trip, a third party, an internship, or individual lessons and things like that, they are there to collect that information and to share with you any policies or practices that should be done, and also to be the person to elevate your voice and your needs to campus leadership, because they're supposed to have a direct relationship with your chancellor to elevate your needs. So you all are no longer working in silos and having a hard time getting your needs elevated. So it might be your compliance person, it might be a risk management, or it might be a program director with a large portfolio of programs. All right, so after the event, you all will receive a survey of today's events. And basically, we want to know how we can continue to support you. We did receive a few questions from the presenters for specific information that they wanted to know. So we'll put that in there too. Any other questions? Is there a plan to create a list of participant emails on this call to create a statewide community of practice? Yes, that is correct. So we will be developing a community of practice for program directors and coordinators, and a community of practice for pre-college liaisons so they can crowdsource and share information. So we will sort through those who have registered based on their roles. There are a few that are administrative roles that are collecting information, but then there are others that are program directors and pre-college liaisons. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Prasinia. I did have a question. If our liaison is moving on or retiring, how do we know who the next person is in line so that there's a seamless line of communication in that instance?
So we've been working with the chancellors directly, so they are to assign them and to inform them to communicate with the program directors. So if you have someone that's transitioning, I do believe that your chancellors will be letting us know, and we'll be working with them to make sure they connect with all programs on their campus and activities on their campus.
Thank you.
No problem.
And it sounds like we'll be posting the roster of liaisons on the website. So anyone who doesn't know who their liaison is can go to our website and find that out.
And since Katie's on, I'll have her introduce herself and thank everyone that was on the back end that was helping put this on today. I know that Sydney has to go to class. So Sydney Marsh has been the one that's been sending out all the emails and getting you all set up to be on the platform. So thank you, Sydney. And then Tom has been in the background working on making sure that the platform itself works and breaking you out into outbreak rooms. So I just wanted to thank Tom Fielding for that. And then Katie, who is over the Director of Office of Integrity and Compliance, who is supporting me and all of the work that we're doing for all the system schools. So thank you all for your support. I think Christina Williston is still on here as well. And Christina has been doing the website, so making sure that all the data is up to date and putting letterhead on everything. So thank you all for all of your support. And then thank you all for just showing up and getting this information. I think that this is so much better than just waking up tomorrow and saying I'm going to do a program without any support or guidance. So I'm glad that you all came and got this information.